Moving on to the last session for the day, which will focus around the authenticity of influencer engagement. Authentic versus perfect. Where is the trade off? The panelists for this session are Amrit Raj, Director for Brand and Communications at Zetwerk Manufacturing, Harjot Dhawan, Principal Consultant at First Partners, Michelle Francis, GM for Corporate Brand and Communications at Godrej Industries, Malvika Sinha, Senior VP and Technology Practice Lead at Rudafin India, and Rishi Seth, Founder and CEO at EVOC. Moderating the panel is Garima Sharma, Principal Consultant at Archetype. Garima, all eyes and ears on you now.
Thank you so much, Anubhuti. Welcome up, everybody. All right, I think as Malvika joins in, let's set the context. We are the last panel of the day. There have been a lot of conversations that have happened on influencer marketing. As expected, large part of the conversation has been around digital influencers because that is the way to go and, getting the maximum eyeballs right now. But communication never has been devoid of influence. There have always been, influencers, be it in the digital space, face of or the physical um, place, be it experts, policymakers, media, and a whole gamut of people who influence brands' communications. But I think the question here is for all of us to stir the pot a little and talk about the authenticity of the entire process, more so in the current day and age, where reach, like, numbers, shares, and subscriptions are basically commanding and becoming a major yardstick for evaluating influence. The question essentially that we're going to address and largely talk about is perfection versus authenticity. So, first of all, are we as communicators, as custodians of communication for various brands that we represent, be it as a client or as a consulting firm, are we doing justice to the purpose and the ethic of communication, the fact checking that's imperative at the back end? Or are we only chasing affinity and love for the brand? And in this process, how are we trading off authenticity? So I think I'd like to open the panel for all of us to, first discuss the entire, the basic comparison between the two, the trade-off between authenticity versus perfection. Is there anything such as perfection in influencer engagement? So let's go ahead and speak to you first, Amrit. Your opening comments, especially from a point of view of mapping a brand as iconic as Royal Enfield, and because it was one of those cult brands that actually became the cult on back of authentic influencers for sure. Digitization was still something that happened much later in the journey. What are your learnings? What is your take from an opening standpoint? And then we get to the rest of us.
Hi, thanks, Garima. Hi, everyone. I think I'll answer this question in two parts. First, like we all know that influencer marketing has exploded like anything. If you just go on social media right now, it's all full of all kinds of content which is there, and all kinds of influencers are there. The challenge that it proposes in front of brands and custodian of brands like us is that do you want to be a part of that clutter? That's question one. And if you can't avoid it, how do you ensure that you have a niche or you have an identity? So I think that's a larger call that we as brand marketers need to take. And I've, like you mentioned about Royal Enfield, if I actually go back in time a little bit, Royal Enfield never thought that it would do influencer marketing. Royal Enfield was mostly an idea of taking your motorcycle out and perhaps going to Ladakh, or perhaps going to Bhutan or wherever you want to go. And they found more and more people who wanted to do that, and then they built a community around it. And those people who are a part of that community became their brand ambassadors. So if you just look at Royal Enfield's marketing budget, last I remember was 400 odd crore in a year. But where does that money go? Does it go in print ads or paying influencers to do campaigns online or on TV ads? No, they just spend it on people who matter. They build communities, they organize these rides like Himalayan Odyssey or Writer Mania, and they have very, very loyal customers. I think that's something which all of us, all the brands, need to look at. Not necessarily that solution will apply to all of us, but there have been several such examples. If you just forget Royal Enfield for some time, and just think about what Red Bull does. It says it gives you wings. It doesn't say that it's the best energy drink, and it says it is selling an idea of giving you wings, and it does things around it. So clearly there are solutions which are there, and we need to kind of look at those solutions and see what's the best that comes and gets applied to our business.
Yeah, so I think that's interesting that, there is this idea in which you invest. There is this like-mindedness that can act as a glue for the entire community. And if that is identified and done well, then the rest just follows. Moving on to you, Michelle, what are your thoughts on influencer engagement per se, and more so about perfection and versus authenticity? I think you're talking on mute.
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Awesome. So thank you very much, everyone. And I think authenticity is like that big buzzword right now. While we talk authenticity and then we want perfection, and that's where the paradox lies, right? So when you get into that bogged down completely into that whole analysis paralysis kind of a situation, I want my content to be authentic, yet I want my content to be perfect at the same time, right? So there you start reflecting on how I build that unique connection with my content and with my communication. And when you talk about unique connection, you're talking about you're talking about yourself, you're talking about the personal you to build that unique connection. And if it is personal, then completely it is imperfect. So if it's you, it is imperfect, right? And on social media, the only person that you would want to look like is you, the imperfect you, the honest you, the genuine you. And that's the challenge that I see, right? When brands try to dictate terms of how you need to look on social media, and that one size fits all kind of an approach, right? So I have a bunch, and I'll give you one example, and I think this is best, like Amrit said, that when you have a community of bikers and you're having like-minded people and you're building and you're growing that community for yourself, you have that captive audience, right? So I recently came across a snacking brand and a leading snacking brand who tapped the entire influencer community for one of their latest campaigns on their particular snacking brand, right? So they had your celeb influencers and they had the macro influencers. And since we tapped the influencer community closely, I happened to see that even the lighting and the frame setting, forget the script, even the lighting and the frame setting of all 40 influencers that they might have hired was same. So I'm saying that you want to be perfect. That might be a brand manager's dream come true, that mere brand messages deliver ho gaye and kya matlab influencer picked up the box like that and she did this and she did that. But the community at large is smart enough, right? So they can call this out and they can call it out very easily. Vis-a-vis a content piece where I am having a conversation about my child and I subtly plug in that same snacking brand in my child's tiffin, in my regular piece of content, and say, this is like a easy hack for me, I don't need to think so much of what to give her during snack time, and this is what I pack, and it's so well delivered, and we all know that that works well, subtle integrations work well. But sometimes we get into that whole in that whole state that I need to ensure my messages are delivered, I need to ensure that my brand messages are in place, and we forget the basic principle of what the influencer needs to communicate, right? She needs to relate to her audience. Recently, I had my agency giving me a recommendation of a script for an influencer for one of my financial brands. And they told me that one of my features of the brand is that you can design your EMI. And you're designing your EMI is as unique as putting a pizza toppings for yourself, right? Making a Subway burger, selecting what you want in your burger. That's how unique I want to position my brand. And the influencer called me up and said, Michelle, I know that your agency has briefed me, but they want me to make a sandwich. I don't even cook. That's when I realized that, look, my creative campaign might be great, right? And if I share that piece of social media post with a lovely creative post saying that as easy as making your own pizza, but that influencer made me realize that her community is not going to engage with that content. She doesn't cook. You're expecting her for your brand. She was smart enough to call it out and tell the brand, hey, hello, make me do something else, but not cooking, right? So there are many people who just do it from a transactional perspective. And that's where that authenticity versus perfect, I feel that whole balance is missed, right? So I always say, get your ABCs right. Be authentic, but yet have believable content. If your content is authentic and not believable, then it's a challenge.
Yeah, very interesting, because you talk about how personalization is important, and it cannot be a sanitized outcome that you're looking for. While sanitized outcomes can ensure perfection, but then they trade off authenticity. And how often do these influencers have the equation or the ability or the courage to come to a brand and say that this doesn't work for me? So I think it's a two-way road. So later in the conversation, it'd be great to pick this up again and bring in point of views from everybody. Moving on to Malvika, what are your thoughts on opening thoughts on the subject?
I think if I just look at your question that you've asked us, there is no right answer, and pretty much like what Michelle also pointed out. I think it's a confusing space because there is no formula. From how I see it, influencer marketing should be very simple, and it should be born out of advocacy. Like a brand has advocates, find them, reward them for loving your brand, and use them as a mouthpiece for your message. That's the simple way it should work, but obviously it's much more complex. And I'll tell you where the authenticity debate comes in, and we've touched upon that with Amrit and Michelle. Unfortunately, many brands today think they can shortcut trust. They pay people to promote things that they don't actually use or believe in. So while this influencer reached out to Michelle to say that I don't cook, but there are many who will just take it ahead and do it. And obviously the result is it feels fake, it feels inauthentic, which breeds a lot of distrust amongst customers. And I think the reality is that, and we all know it, that consumers just hate being sold a lie. The value of influencer marketing lies in the authenticity. And I think because of the distrust in advertising, which has grown because the audience is more discerning now, I think more importantly, finding the right influencer remains the biggest challenge. And the more and more brands that we work for today, a lot of them are doing a lot of trial and error to see what creates stickiness for their brand, because staying relevant is life or death in such a crowded market. And I think it's really integral to maintain relevance. If we choose the right influencer, we will have an authentic and real connection with our audience. And this is rare, but this is precious. And I think all of us as an industry, we should advise our clients on the authenticity of influencers more and more, instead of just riding on the wave that this is the trend, these are the number of followers, and we just go ahead. I think ensuring that we are working with genuine content creators so that we are able to establish more meaningful connections. It is important. I really feel that as an industry, we continue to protect influencers and not just ride on this wave. The trend of using influencers to promote at all costs should not be detrimental to the industry. That's what I feel. Diminishing the reputation of influencer marketing in its wake. And this is where we as industry peers need to take a stand, to stand together and strive for transparency and authenticity before we create irreversible damage. I think the future of the industry depends on that. I think that's what, yeah.
Thank you for your views, Malvika. I think I completely agree with you. There is no shortcut to trust. And when and moving on to Rishi and Harjot, when we have to scale up, when there is scale involved in influencer engagement, and it's no hidden fact that there are commercials that are riding on this function. In wake of that, coming to you, Rishi, how would you look at that because you're representing a consulting firm, right? There is multiple brands from different sectors that we are talking about here, and for a few, maybe a spot on influencer, which is a limited number for a limited period of time, might work, and they may have the ability to build that relationship over a period of time. But when you need scale and there are commercials involved, bringing that point of view, what would be your point of view on this entire piece? Is Rishi audible to everybody? He's not to me. Rishi, you're not audible.
No, he's not.
You're not on mute, but you're not audible. Let's go to Harjot and till Rishi fixes his piece, and then we come to him.
Yeah, I have a slightly different approach to this entire topic, because even the way we look at perfection, the normal viewpoint is that if somebody has a high number of followers, that's just perfect. That person is doing well in life and creating great content. That's the takeaway from that. And even the platforms are designed in a sense to show us trending conversations first, as opposed to maybe necessarily relevant content. So the irony of the situation here is that even the influencers per se, they tend to diversify their content in order to suit various audience types. And as the last panel was also discussing, micro influencers are therefore gaining momentum and are in huge demand right now, because they are perceived as more authentic. You have a lower number of followers, but you're focusing on one niche topic and you take command of that topic. So I believe authenticity is really coming into light and gaining momentum, but there's still a long way to go. People really are questioning, how authentic can an influencer be if they're spread too thinly. So that, I think, is the right way to go. And maybe look at examples of influencers who've diversified their content and lost that engagement rate with the audiences. So engagement rate is a very, very good metric for talking about authenticity, because that shows that your audience, who whatever number that might be, that could be 500 or 5,000 or 50,000 people, but are they really engaging with your content? So that for me is the right approach.
Yeah, thank you for that point of view, Harjot. And I think that's something that that is the beauty of digital engagement with influencers. The fact that we can track and the fact that we can evaluate impact. And while numbers may not dictate everything, but we cannot ignore them when they are in front of us. So Rishi is back with us. Rishi, your point of view.
Yes, so thank you, Garima. I'm sorry for the small technical issue. But my point of view about authenticity is that it is actually the bedrock of all communications, not just influencer marketing or influencers engagement. And it is also a precursor to perfection, if we are looking for perfection in influencers marketing. And the reason I say that is essentially looking at it from an audience point of view. I think we, as communicators and as brand custodians, ought to give far more credit to the audiences who are way too smart to see and evaluate, whether a message is authentic enough, whether they are being shilled a product or a service, or whether it is genuinely organic and reflects the views of the influencer and is also in tune with the other content that they are used to seeing from the influencer. So, in fact, I was reading a research report from, I think it was from Google, which said that 70% of people said that they trust the voice or the opinion of an influencer as much or probably more than the advice or the opinion of their best friends. So with such heavy and high expectation from influencer opinions, I think as brand owners, as brand custodians, and as communicators, it is absolutely imperative for us to gun for authenticity, and I think that is really the precursor for creating the perfect or near perfect influencers campaign.
Thanks for that, Rishi. And now that we've had our opening thoughts and pretty much the context is set, if I may just because we are at it, and because you represent a consulting firm where you're consulting various brands that may be in a very initial stage of their journey. While we all agree that authenticity is imperative, but coming back to the point that there are times that you have objectives, there are KPIs that you need to meet, there are call to actions that need to be taken care of, and there is money riding on it. In a scenario like that, do you think we as an industry, or this as a tool, influencer engagement, is rewarding authenticity enough? Are we creating a conducive environment enough? Do you think, like Harjot mentioned, that there is need for evaluating engagement, reach, and ensuring all of that is in place? Do you think the environment right now is conducive enough to promote authenticity as much as it should be? Or in our desire to achieve the messages that we want to, we trade it off at times, or we
Not at
succumb
all.
to the pressure?
Yeah, not at all. Unfortunately, I think it's a matter of concern for me as a communicator. And in fact, I want to go back to what Michelle mentioned, that she saw some campaign where all 40 influencers had this exact same lighting and setting and the script. So the challenge is, and Garima, you also rightly mentioned that as marketers, we are often being pressured by the desire to show certain KPIs and show certain levels of engagement and impressions or reach, and that really forces our hand to compromise on authenticity. What I see it's more of a battle which is between strategy and tactical short-term results. You might definitely get the short-term results which would look good on your presentations, and it would possibly get you a maybe win you a certain award or so. But ultimately, and from the long-term point of view, you are causing certain damage to your brand, and that's something that you should be very wary of. If you compromise on authenticity for too long and for way too much, I think as I started by saying, that people are way too smart, and then we as marketers give them credit for. And what we also have to see is that I want to give you an example. I follow certain leading fashion influencers, and sometimes I do come across their promotional posts which look and feel so different from the regular content. And the problem is, on Instagram, it takes just a flick of a thumb to scroll past a message which clearly looks like a promotional message. And once you are past that's a message, all of us are smart enough to recognize within a nanosecond whether this content is authentic or not. If not all of us, majority of us. And once that message goes past, that does two damages, because the Instagram will show to the marketer that so and so person has seen that whatever video or post, but I have not engaged with it. And on the contrary, if the brand came in my perspective, I probably am carrying a negative opinion, because it is coming across as an inauthentic message. So I think fundamentally it's a fight between whether you want short-term results and are happy with your good charts and graphs on your presentation, or you want to build the brand patiently over a long term, and you want to preserve the sanctity of your brand's voice and authenticity when you are engaging with influencers.
Thank you so much for that point of view. While you were talking about it, and still Michelle and Amrit nodding to this point, and I'm sure there are enough tassels that one has with business leaders and teams internally. Bringing you in, Michelle, on this, and maybe then we can go to Amrit. What's been your experience of of really using this instrument, or this tool per se, and when you have these conversations with business leaders, where maybe certain KPIs and targets are critical, you cannot ignore them. At the end of the day, you're trying to make an impact. So how what are those conversations like? And with examples, if you can talk about short-term gains and long-term impact. Michelle, you'll have to unmute yourself.
So I completely agree with Rishi on this whole piece where, the community can call it out. It's a very slippery, soppy place to be in. They know there's like cognitive ag blocker in the minds of everyone who's navigating through social media, right? I know where I need to disconnect. I know where I need to engage. There's only that much you could handhold me onto your piece of content, right? When I have these conversations with my stakeholders internally, and what's worked well for us is very clearly in setting the whole process in place, right? So I think we should leave content creators are known to be great content creators, right? So let's leave the creativity part to them. And while I would want to deliver my message, I think you should give them that liberty to play around with your messaging. That's when you get unique, authentic pieces out with that whole, like Rishi said, right? When you scroll through them and you follow them regularly, suddenly you see a piece of content which is not completely in sync with what they usually talk about. That's when you call out, because that's not them. That's when brands are dictating the terms, right? So when content creators know to do their job well, and hats off, right? So I firmly believe, because we have our own brand pages, and all of us are running communities and pages of our own, and you know how difficult it is to engage with an audience, right? A friend will come and give you a thumbs up and like and share, but for communities to follow you and for people organically to follow you, they're doing something right out there, right? I it's way beyond, hey, hello guys, welcome back to my channel, right? If their audience is, and that's like the education that I need to do with my stakeholders. I sit them down and I have this conversation with them. You need to understand that there's a lot of effort that they are putting in to put that one piece of content. It's not about just putting a lipstick out there and saying this is the OTTD of my day and this is why I'm wearing this and this is how their community wants that piece of content. That's why they are putting it, and they're getting some great response on that. And then suddenly, if you want to put in your chicken brand out there, and you want to put in your financial brand out there, and you want to say, hey, my soap, then you need to figure out how you're communicating on that page, right? So you need to leave that creativity to them. And then the most important thing is that you need to respect the fact that they are engaging with the audience for a particular set of audience that is liking their format of content, right? So if you feel that that particular influencer is not sharing your values, right? This influencer is not good for my brand. Imagine I'm going with a fried food snack to an influencer who's always posting about health. And I have seen that on their page. She might have 1 million followers, but she's only posting her yoga videos. And then you're telling her to hold a pack of fried food snacks. You're going to be called out. Might get that numbers of likes, right, on her page, but is it creating that conversion ratio for you? Is it creating that? Look at her kind of followers. Her community is following her because of her niche. And what we usually do, and I always see that, you niche hop, right? So I say that this is my niche and this is what I want to stick to. We need to understand who we want to speak to, right? What is my target? Target. I keep telling all my stakeholders, target micro, less is more. Have a handful of people, but that consistency is very important. One influencer speaking 365 days about me is far more than that 1 million influencers speaking once about me, right? So how do I target my right influencer base? How I share the same value with her or with him, and then how I deliver my message effectively. Leave the creativity to her, leave the creativity to him. Let them deliver it in their style. Let that subtle integration be. The moment it is done by the brand team, it's going to be a branded piece of content. And there's a difference between a television commercial and a digital piece of content. So I think a lot is depending on us and how we educate our stakeholders and our brands and our marketeers of what they need to do, and you need to draw that line somewhere. So once that clarity is there, then I think it's much more effective.
Yeah, so I think it's about identifying the right person, giving them the creative liberty to create and curate the way they want to, which, Amrit, is very similar to what we do in advertising versus PR, right? You've been a journalist for a long time, and fairly meritorious one at that. But when you as a journalist, there is this entire editorial bench. There is this training that you're giving. Influencers, most often than not, are people who are born out of thin air, right? Some of them are fairly credible who worked on it. They've built their communities, like we said initially, on back of something that holds the whole community together. Where do we lie, as brand custodians, that you're giving away your brand to somebody to project it and you know create a creative rendition which may have their own personalized elements. So from that perspective, while we want to give that personalization, customization, and liberty to be authentic with what they're saying, but how do we build guardrails around it and to ensure that there what are the do's and don'ts? Are there any tips and tricks of doing that right?
Yeah, I mean, it's a big question. See, I work for a very young brand. We are a 4-year-old startup, and this discussion happens every day. That what is it that we want to become? Where do we want to go? And we are a B2B company. We are not a B2C company, so it becomes even more challenging. All kinds of pressure in terms of costs. What's the requirement for doing a campaign if you're a B2B company? Just be seen at the right places, etc., etc. Uh, but what I'm trying to say is that every brand has perhaps two practical purposes, right? One is that you create top of the funnel for your sales team, and which is where I think influencer marketing becomes very, very important. But perhaps something which is on a higher pedestal is whether while you're building that brand, whether you are able to create nostalgia or recall. I think all of us kind of need to think about that. Um, you and I would still remember Daag Achhe Hain campaign, right? I mean, all of us have something or the other to be attached to. Either we growing up as kids, had gave our mothers like a run for their money, or our kids are giving the same treatment to us. But that campaign has stuck with us. Or you look at the Fevicol ka jod hai tootega nahi, as compared to Indiranagar ka gunda hu main. So what I'm trying to say is that idea and messaging, both of them are very important. Influencer marketing can meet certain metrics, targets in the short term, but it won't kind of build a brand for myself. And I completely agree with Michelle. Even if you want to do an influencer marketing, you need to kind of identify the people that you want to be associated with and put your bets on them for the long term. It's not a 3 months, 6 months, 1 year process. It's a very, very long term process. So yeah, I mean, as a brand custodian, we need to kind of take a call. What's the kind of brand that we want to build? And if there is a pressure from the management on pushing some metrics, and I know sometimes you just can't say no, but as much as you can, I think we should push back.
Right. Interesting. So this group for sure agrees to the fact that authenticity is where the entire game is. Perfection is something that you clearly aim to achieve, but is that something that we are really able to or not? And it's a journey that you make with the brand influencer then, because if you are in it for the long haul, then you will have to own up those mistakes also with this person and walk the talk with this person. Some campaigns might fly, some might not. Coming to you, Malvika, I'd like to get a perspective. Large part of this conversation has again drifted towards digital influencers, but the fact remains that the influence on a brand is not just of digital influencers or Instagrammers or the YouTube sensations who might be there for the short term. When the does the nature of communication and the purpose of communication command what influencers we must engage, and in engaging influencers beyond digital media, what's your view on that? What are the lenses or what are the guardrails that we should be aware of when we are engaging with influencers who may not have an immediate impact in the digital sphere?
I think each audience and platform has a very different role to play, and it is not about choosing one over the other. So I think purpose defined communication, and I think we have discussed that today, becomes most important. I think the audience, the message, and the platform, these three are the most important things. And what's common with all of them is authenticity. We've discussed people can see through gimmicks. We have an evolved audience. There is more access to information. And it doesn't really matter which platform you use. Just important to be authentic, honest, and sincere, be it a crisis or be it a brand campaign. That's what I think I am seeing. And when you talk about traditional and new age digital influencers, I think also PR and digital are not separate anymore. Communication is cutting through. Where how again what my observation is, where traditional influencers are still being used by a lot of brands because they still help build authenticity. The micro and nano pool of influencers are definitely leading the trend when it comes to driving narratives, creating pop culture, and driving engagement directly with the consumers. But on the other hand, I also feel that one of the biggest challenges of influencer marketing is that it eludes the traditional ROI metrics. That is why I think a lot of brands fall into the trap of one and done kind of Instagram campaigns that are a flash in the pan with no real chance of actually moving the needle. And while we've discussed on what are the things that brands need to keep in mind while engaging, actually choosing the right influencer, which is what I touched upon before this, I think more and more, and I can't emphasize that enough, in my client interactions, in my interactions with the team, is that we can only emphasize more and more on helping brands and consulting brands on choosing the right person, choosing the right influencers, and using them to our benefit in a very authentic way.
Right. Thank you so much. You again touched upon the importance of ROI, and Harjot, from your digital experience, you are the go-to person in the consulting space for us to go back. And, every time a client asks us that, kitna milega out of this entire thing. So are there any best practices there? How is the measurement yardstick evolving? In the panels before us also, there was a lot of conversation on the need for standardizing, at least broadly standardizing, which actually poses a question to this entire customization and personalization approach that we are talking about. There is one school of that thought that talks about uh, you know um, counting the uncountable. In that sense, there is so much more that you get with an influencer if there is a personal connect and that there is customization. But at the end of the day, there needs to be some yardstick and standardization in the process. What are your views on it? How sophisticated is the whole tracking, evaluation, and measurement uh, uh, yeah process so far?
Very interesting question, because that's something I face almost every day. And what happens is that there are clients who are looking for numbers. There are influencers who don't want to share numbers, and you're kind of stuck in the middle, trying to justify the ROI. And then there's a whole hidden element, because there are certain numbers you can see on the face when you interact with an influencer, and there are certain things, obviously statistics, that only the influencer has access to. So that's a larger piece that happens with a relationship that's built over time with an influential person. So data definitely is very important when it comes to influencers. And it can be the filtering criteria, so to say, to begin with, before you even get into the interaction or the collaboration. The second layer is the facts of the matter. What is the influential person talking about vis-a-vis what is the brand message that I want to deliver? Does that really go in sync with this particular person? That's one of the more important things here. So, to take a couple of examples, which probably the audience will also relate to. If I were working with a food brand that needs to do a very hyper local kind of a campaign in, let's say, Delhi, and they want to engage influencers for promoting their products. Now, in this scenario, my go-to approach would be to tell them to engage micro influencers and not go with the bigger celebrity kind of influencers. Because let's say somebody from West Delhi who's got 5,000 odd followers is more relevant to me, because the followers are also from that area, and they follow the content and hence will also relate to my products. And then I'll accordingly pick more micro influencers like that from different regions in Delhi. Coming to another example where there's, let's say, a bigger awareness push required, there my approach would be a little different. I would look at, let's say, one mega influencer, like a celebrity, and maybe, couple it up with a couple of micro influencers. Or ROI wise, what works really well is I engage with, let's say, 20 odd micro influencers instead of one celebrity. That gets me better ROI and probably the same amount of reach. So it's really, when it comes to the ROI, it's really about what are we going after at the end of the day. And with several influencers, you have the ability to reach out to wider audiences, different sets of audiences, and generate more sales also in the process. Then there's a different category of influencers, which are, your knowledge specialists or your domain specialists. They might not have a huge following, but their followers are relevant to me. And hence, when I engage with them, I might keep numbers aside for a second and, explain my cause or my topic to them. If it interests them, great. If they feel like they want to be associated with it, they would pick up the narrative and, work on it. And I would leave it to them to take that up, deliver the message in their own tonality. So the approach really varies as per what is the action to be taken here.
Sure. So it's about thinking in advance and trying to put a matrix to the whole engagement and then following that depending on the customized need. We are now coming to nearing the end, and about 30 seconds for each of us to quickly wrap this with one final word on the need for regulating this space, because authenticity or perfection, all of these things, if we are talking about all of that, then we're walking a tight rope there. Do you think this this space must be regulated? Yes or a no? And maybe just a one statement or two to qualify your answer. Let's go around the room. Amrit, let's start with you.
So I think self-regulation is something which I would go with. I don't think there's a need to completely stop it or take it to another pedestal. But we need to be careful about how we use this phenomena.
Great. Michelle? You'll have to unmute yourself.
Sorry. So yeah, self-regulation is one piece, and I think we need to look beyond, like you were asking Malvika also, we need to look beyond the standard set of people who we are targeting. And when you get into this whole key opinion leadership space, and when you're getting into more credible partnership, like for one of our brands, for a kids brand, the logical extension is a mummy influencer. But one of my brand team partnered with a maternity photographer, a celebrity maternity photographer. And she did what I did with 25 mummy influencers, the kind of affiliate marketing I did with a celebrity mummy photographer was far better. So I think we need to figure out, either we sit back and watch and see what's happening, or you ride onto this bus and experiment and learn on the go and expand your universe rather than just tapping the same set of people. It's all about just expanding, and you never know the power of one, right? Even an education expert can be an influencer in his own space. So it's just about experimenting with new people and getting credible people to talk on your behalf.
Sure, great. Malvika?
I think with so much money flooding into this largely unregulated, still developing market, all sorts of ethical lapses, are bound to happen. And we have all seen, in fact, they have it, and there are various examples for it. While yes, self-regulation is one, and I feel there is a strong need to regularly audit and monitor this general social media activity to highlight errors and provide time to both the brand advertisers and influencers for rectification. I just feel directly penalizing them will not serve the purpose, which is what
But
happens.
there needs to be check and balances in place.
Absolutely, there have to be guardrails for sure.
Sure. Rishi?
Yes, I am for regulation. I think regulation will work in two ways. One is it will, exert enough pressure on the influencers to do something really creative and authentic, rather than just weaving a brand or a product in their day-to-day creatives without disclosing that it is a paid post. Secondly, I think it's also in a way it plays to the advantage of all three stakeholders, the brands as well. Having the influencers disclose their affiliations. I think it's much more transparent. It's an opportunity for brands to be more transparent with their audiences,
Sure,
and
sure.
for people, of course, it's always a there will always be some gullible people in the audience who believe everything that they read on WhatsApp, and they need to be told that look, this is a paid post, and
Sure. Yeah, great. Anubhuti is here, and I know we've overshot our time, but we'll quickly wrap with the word from Harjot, and then over to you, Anubhuti.
Okay, so I feel, this is a creative space, so I don't think there is a need for too much regulation here. But yes, there are monies flowing in, as Malvika said. So, things like calling it a paid promotion, I think they are enough to kind of tell the gullible audience, like Rishi mentioned, that this is a paid engagement, and therefore they're driving the brand message, and it's not coming from their heart. So, but besides that or beyond that, I don't think there is really a need for regulation. The ASCII guidelines are pretty much, doing a good job of creating awareness to begin with. But when it comes to creating boundaries around the kind of, creativity that can flourish in this industry, I believe that that's not required at the moment.
All right. Thank you so much. Great discussion. Quickly recapping with a few thoughts that have come out. Personalization, need for creativity, not, cutting corners when it comes to really promoting brands and talking from the heart, and building that trust that's necessary, by not just focusing on short-term games, but a long-term equation, and community building is something that's going to take influencer marketing a long way. Thank you, everybody, for your time. Over to you, Anubhuti.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Garima. Thank you, all the panelists, Amrit, Harjot, Malvika, Michelle, and Rishi, for this wonderful discussion.